Okay. So, about um, 3 years, 4 years ago, my brother and myself ended up at a space where we needed a workshop for ourselves. And we started looking around at ideas and spaces, and so I've been asked to talk about our little project. Um, uh, and we basically started looking at a workshop space that we could share with other people. I've got a bit of a history working in development, and a couple of ideas started merging. So hence the community labs or makerspace or hackerspace, and how to make that into a sort of sustainable business model. I hope I'm going to click this thing in the right direction. So we're attempting this. This little project of ours has been running for 2 years now. We totally see it as an experiment at this point, so hence it's an attempt. We needed a small workshop for ourselves. Basically, my brother is into anything that's got metal and grease, and I pretty much anything that gives you splinters. So between the two of us, we needed workshop space. His release ran out, and I needed new space. So we had the idea that we'll get a small workshop space. Then we sort of looked at this whole idea of maker spaces and sharing space, and we started planning and looking at all the variables and options and things that you could plug into a space and make it bigger, because what we really wanted was a nice big ass space, 800 square meter space for ourselves, where we could mess and have all the toys under the sun, every tool that opens and closes. We looked at all the tech shops and all the models all over the world, all the amazing projects. Tech shops is a maker space that runs in the States. They spend millions and millions of dollars on tools and equipment, a lot of rapid prototyping equipment. So we had big dreams in the beginning. So we did get our space, and we started filling it with makers. So these are our makers. Some of them were objecting to mugshots, so we went for the hands. So what is a makerspace? So there's a million versions of it. It's been coming on for the last 15 years or so. The whole maker movement, makerspace idea is sort of a bit of an American idea. It's a lot of things catalyzed the maker movement, and the movement for people to start sharing workshops, sharing space, sharing facilities. With 9/11 and all those things happening 10 years ago, the war in the Middle East and stuff like that, a lot of the Americans, and if you look at sort of fashion trends and home trends, started a trend towards cocooning, and that sort of basically drove sort of the market for all the sort of products that are sort of what handmade products and manufactured, homemade, and at the same time all the technologies that you're all familiar with started becoming sort of tabletop, desktop, and these things converged, and people started home industries and started sharing equipment, sharing spaces. People started getting together in garages, playing with everything from Arduino to 3D printing to laser cutting. And then over the years, this whole movement developed for makers to get together. They coined the phrase maker movement, maker spaces. But the gist of it is that people get together and share facilities that they normally won't have access to. So now I'm preaching to the choir a little bit, but I'm just building a case for why we ended up with a maker space. So that's basically the the source of maker spaces, the shared workshop spaces. So we looked at it and we said, now who would we looked at all the models internationally, we said, like, who would we service in our area? We want a big workshop space, we can't afford it all for ourselves, we need to share. How would we make a business out of running a makerspace? I'll show you some slides later. In my sort of 20-year career, I spent about 30% of my time in development. Spent a lot of time all over Africa, Southern Africa, working with rural communities. And because I come from a product design and development background and always ran sort of furniture factories and all kinds of manufacturing, I sort of ended up consulting to NGOs, development agencies, and funders in sort of the sort of small-scale manufacturing industries all over Southern Africa, Botswana, Swaziland, all over South Africa. Sort of a pet project, sort of my passion project. And we looked at how we could use these ideas of maker spaces all over the world, the models, and what we could transfer to South Africa and Africa. At the same time, still serving my brother and my own sort of little need of having a big workshop space, but making a business model that's sort of sustainable. Something that we can take all the good practice from everywhere and bring it here and try and run this experiment to run a maker space. So we looked at hobbyists and DIYers and startup businesses and prototypers, the professionals and model builders, the product designers, set builders, all kinds of people that are in the making industries. So we plonked our business down in Woodstock, and we pretty much sort of figured out that, seeing that we're in Woodstock, we are the drug dealers. So what we are, just not in the literal sense, but we are the people now that are selling your drugs. So we make these gateway drugs like 3D printing, the desktop stuff, the laser cutters, the small bits of tools, the exotic stuff that people don't normally have access to in their garage, available to people, and get them hooked and get them in and get their small businesses just that little bit of lubrication to start prototyping something, manufacturing something. Even small things like our leather worker, just branding his leather work with a professionally cut laser badge and stuff like that. So we're the drug dealers. We're the pushers on the corner. We're very low level. We are jacks of all trades, and we literally are masters of none. My tagline on my email says jack of all trades and master of fun. We try and be sort of the catalysts at the bottom of the pyramid. So yeah, in my running around all over, and some of these things key into what the panel was talking about as well. One of the big things, and it also brought me back to the makerspace idea, and when my brother came to me looking for workshop space, I had this other secret agenda. In development, and especially in rural development, in the whole value chain, when you bring an intervention into a community, whether it's agriculture or manufacturing, something like that, there's always big holes, and there's a lot of people servicing it. There's business developers and product developers and consultants and market developers and agents that will sell your stuff and things, but there's always a gap in your access to equipment and in workspace. Funders and people in the sort of development sector, and especially in the people that bring the funding in, and especially over the last 10 years, have become very shy of capital outlay in development projects. Because it's high risk. It's cheap to send a consultant and to teach somebody how to do a bit of better business, but it's much harder to give him a plant to run something out in the Gramadulas, where the risks are very high. So the whole small scale manufacturing and giving people access to tools and workspace and expertise has always been a niggling project of mine. And it all comes back to the makerspace thing. So these are sketches I made about 10 years ago. And it was a concept I was, excuse me, trying to sell to, I think back then it was Conservation International or one of those organizations that started pulling back funding from a project I was busy with. When we came back to them after analyzing the project and said, it's all fine and well that you help these people with all these things that you're proposing and asking us to do, but after we've looked at it, the biggest hole is that these people just don't have the tools to do. They can figure out. People are very capable of figuring out how to get stuff out of deep rural Eastern Cape to a city. There's networks of transport and there's people wangle. But if they don't have the machine to make the widget that you're wanting to get from them, they're out of the loop anyway. So the idea was that we tried to sort of get around their reticence to actually invest in infrastructure and said, like, let's containerize workspaces, sort of dedicated. Like, if you want a wood workshop, we put it in a container, you deploy it. If the project flies, you add another one. If you build a permanent infrastructure and it runs, and if the project fails, which 90% of them do for a million reasons, then you pluck the container out of the project and you redeploy it or you refit it to become a 3D printing plant or a seedling growing house or whatever. So full circle back to our makerspace. So because I've spent so many years working with development and with NGOs, I hope there's not too many people here working from NGOs. I've developed a bit of a pet hate for the NGO business model. There's certain places where it is a really good model to run and it works very well, and then there's certain spaces where it just really falls apart or it's very vulnerable. And when we started the Maker Station, we started off right from the beginning saying that we are not going to take any funding. We're not going to take any investors from outside. We're going to bootstrap it completely. So we literally had the first month's rent, and I think we sort of had like a couple of weeks where we didn't have electricity, and it wasn't just ESCOM. And we started bootstrapping it. The big reason was that we wanted to sort of find a way to run this, test all these ideas, all these little revenue models that we've picked out of other makerspaces, and actually run it and be able to sort of pivot whenever we wanted. Sometimes we changed the business model in 3 days because we just found that we were doing something completely stupid. And we felt that if we were bound by funders and donors or investors, we'd be sort of trapped into sort of somebody else's program. And we really didn't know what we were doing. So we're still fumbling along a bit, but we're much clearer about what we're doing. So over the time, we've realized that as a makerspace, the 3 things that we of course, like I said in the beginning, we wanted every toy. We went to the bank. We were lining up laser cutters, R500,000 laser cutters, and 3D printers, and everything. We wanted to be a tech shop. We wanted every toy under the sun, sort of a one-stop shop. So you start doing the maths, and you realize 500,000 laser cutter. It will take you 2 years to pay it off. Plus, you need somebody to man it, and there's another 300,000 rand a year to make it pay for itself because it takes so many square meters. You're doing the maths, and suddenly you end up with a bunch of little businesses inside a business, and it becomes a really cumbersome thing. And then you start working out of what you charge people per hour, and that becomes completely inaccessible for your average small-scale manufacturer. They're starting to start paying you 500 rand an hour to get access to a machine or something. That started defeating the purpose. So we changed our idea and basically went and said, we're doing three things. We're not going to be a design company. We're not going to be a manufacturing company. We're not going to be a business consultancy. We're not going to be a training facility. We're not going to do any of those things. There are people that specialize in these things. But what we're going to do is we're going to give people access to tools, to space, and to expertise. And we are completely not going to be precious about where that is. Whether it's inside or outside our building, it's not going to matter to us. Just changing our mindset about that then allowed us to sort of start networking with everybody around us. And we've got a 3D printer. You guys would call it a paperweight. It's about this big. And we just have it in the building for people to tinker with, to play with. They can come in, they can mess with it, they can get the idea, we can demonstrate. You know, there's a huge learning curve from the software, and then you're going to mess up for 3 days trying to print the little cube, and then you've got another 2 days of post-processing. This is what involves the process in 3D printing. So we've got a small laser cutter, we've got a whole bunch of tools in the workshop. And we let people book time, space, can play with these things. But as soon as they get into a point where they really need to prototype or manufacture out of the whole product, one element, a 3D printed element or a laser cut element or an element that's cast in the foundry, then we send them out to the experts. We send them out to the 3D printing bureaus or to the laser cut bureaus and things like that. And changing that has allowed us to become sort of an agent and a facilitator. So we've got 800 square meters of space. We've got almost all the toys under the sun in some form or other. And we've got a big network that we're growing all the time of suppliers and supporters and manufacturers and experts. And we're hooking up our makers with this network, basically. So to get back to a sustainable business model. So we've now tweaked our business model, and we rented out space, and we did all kinds of things. So we've managed to get, after 2 years, our building to a point where we're paying the rent regularly, and we still haven't taken money from anybody. And we're giving a reasonable service to all our members. We've got about 10 permanent tenants. I'll show you, I'll get back to our floor plan and just walk you through that. There's a little video clip I'll talk you through as well. And then we've got a new membership structure, and we're running it a little bit like a gym that will give people access they basically pay a membership, and they'll be able to sort of access the space whenever they want. And then because we are sort of getting close to understanding our business model now, we are now starting to, like any business, we need to think about scaling, because we know that in another 2 years the capacity, the X square meters and hours and time on machines will run out in that building that we've got, maybe even sooner. And we need to scale. So now we're looking at how we could actually scale physically our building. There's limitations in replicating a makerspace. You need critical mass in terms of membership in your area. Our building works well because in Woodstock there's a lot of universities around us, there's a huge artist community. There's a lot of designers and furniture makers in our area. Movie industry is big in our area. But if we move this to a small town, the business model won't work. But there's a network of resources, of maker resources, and they are manufacturers, they are other maker spaces, and they are even just the backyard mechanics that sit with one special tool somewhere, that if we could refer somebody to them, they become part of the dispersed maker space, the maker resource network. So we're changing our model a bit to try and access and make that whole countrywide, continent-wide network of dispersed resources and maker the dispersed makerspace of workspaces and expertise and equipment accessible to our members or our makers. So we've neatened up our business model a little bit. We're now looking at it more as a gym model and as a networking model. And we will have these sort of makerspace or maker station hubs, the motherships, and then networks of mini makerspaces and micro makerspaces around that. So we've been working a bit with the Royal College of Art in London. They came and did a project with us for about 6 weeks, sent a bunch of students over, started working with some projects in the townships, and my old container project came back up. And so the sort of next phase, and that might be where we start talking to some of these other people, is to look at maker stations that do all this, supply the basic facilities, but then also connect people to mini maker spaces, containers that might have single uses or dedicated. So it might be in a township, it'll be a bicycle repair space, or in another area like in a tech area like in Stellenbosch, and where there's a lot of tech development, it might be something that's more appropriate to that area. It speaks to the needs of that area. And then just a general network of expertise out there. How does one plug them into a maker space? I just want to see, I think we might be on past the boring rattling on. Oh, it's given up on me completely. What do I do now? Exit. Just give me that one there. Okay. You can see I work with spanners more than these tools. Try and get this video to play here. Yeah, where can we kill the sound of it? Okay, excuse the annoying music. But, so, this is basically just a few minutes of our space. So we literally do almost any manufacturing in there. This is the building. We've been, as part of trying to get out there with makers, we've engaged with a lot of projects, like you'll see some Africa Burn projects. For 2 years now, we've built about 10 projects every year. It's everything from art cars to installations. We do these disassembly workshops as well. These are some of our tenants, where we also take kids through like disassembly of appliances and stuff. We hosted some of you guys there once or twice. We've got a small foundry. It's just big enough to mess around with. My brother and myself also, we in our own capacity, we're also tenants in the building. So we service, we manufacture custom built sculptures and do restorations and stuff for artists and sculptors in the area. We do a lot of bronze assemblies and things like that. Build stuff for galleries. So these are some of the disassembly workshops that so for a long time this was the closest we got to technology as we took it apart. So we basically let the kids strip anything and then they pretty much build robots out of stuff afterwards. But while they strip the hardware down, we let them explore all the innards. We explain what all the bits do, what all the electronics do, all the mechanics do, and stuff like that. Some of the stuff, there's no health and safety people, yeah, I hope. Some of the stuff we do is a little bit unconventional, so it is Woodstock. Yeah, that's our paperweight. This guy's a set builder. So we've had about 20 small businesses that in the 2 years that have started up and moved out. I think we've got about 10 that's permanent tenants now. So basically we rent out cubicles. You can rent them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis or on a 6-month basis. So you've got sort of, if you rent on a long term, you get a dedicated space. But it allows people to scale the access to the, these were some UCT students with the project. But we allow people to scale the size of the space they want and the duration that they work there to suit their project. We run a lot of workshops and we allow our members to rent space and run workshops as well. Yeah, so we've got a metal shop with a foundry and a forge and pretty much all the welding equipment. We've got sandblasting, we've got a sewing area, we've got a laser cutter, we've got a 3D printer. We've got a well-equipped wood shop. We've got a sort of a mechanics area. These are some of the Africa burn stuff. We've got a mold making and casting area. And then our sort of boardroom. All good prototypes need testing, so. Yeah, so a lot of these are Africa burn bits. So most of these things were built there this year. Yeah, and we're sort of quite liberal about what we accommodate in the making. We've got a kitchen with a rocket stove oven, so there's baking happening. We've got a balcony with some aquaponics experiments on it. We've even got a few musicians that come into our lounge area and make music. We class that as making. These were sort of bits that was 3D printed for us to cast fake bronze plaques that had to look like real bronze plaques because the real ones got stolen. Government logic, don't go there. Yeah, so because we self-funded, we pretty much, there's very little in the building that we actually bought. We pretty much scavenge. All the furniture and infrastructure is all exhibition infrastructure that we recycled. We've got a gold pass at the local municipal dump and at all the scrap metal dealers in the area. So we refurbish a lot of the machinery in the building, as sort of recycled and refurbished machinery. All trying to keep the cost down and sort of. Printed by wood for us. So there's a lot of our members either come in on sort of projects, so they come and come in for a month and build a project, or they small startups that come in and they spend 6 months there just getting their business going, and then we've got a couple of people that come in and just prototype stuff in for a day or two and use the facilities and use our network. And so they'll go out across the road and get something laser cut, come back, glue it together, make a mold, cast it, go down the road and have it cast in metal or something. So that's sort of a whole sort of fluid space, basically. But yeah, that's the gist of it.